I am Hakeem Oluseyi. I am an astrophysicist and author of the new book, Why Do We Exist? The 9 Realms of the Universe That Make You Possible.
The cosmological realm.
When you think of the cosmological realm, think of dynamic space-time. And those dynamics manifest in 2 ways: space-time curvature and space-time motion, primarily stretching and waving. So the realm of cosmology is the realm of dynamic space-time. When I was a graduate student, my PhD advisor turns to me, he goes, "Hey, Hakeem, the solar radiance is like, something, 10 to the 30 ergs per second or some number 10 to the 30th. And I go, yeah, I don't know. And he looks at me and he goes, "What? You call yourself a solar physicist and you don't know the solar radiance?" Right? With this look of almost disgust. And I was like, yo, Hakeem, bro, you need to step up your game. You need to get these numbers embedded in your head. And so I started to understand reality at the astronomical scale in terms of these numbers. I came to understand, like, hey, the moon is 1% the Earth's mass, but 1/4 the Earth's diameter. Mars is 10% the Earth's mass, but 1/2 the Earth's diameter. The sun is 100 times the Earth's diameter. And as I had these numbers in my mind, I was going about my business of being a student, and I taught observational astronomy at the observatory. And one night I was leaving the observatory very late at night, 4 a.m. or so, and it was a clear night, and I looked at the moon. And I contemplated on the fact that the moon was 1/4 the Earth's size. And the fact that it is around just over 60 Earth radii away from us, right? So if you ask a person, if this is the size of the Earth, how big is the moon and how far away it is? You get something like this, right? But it's really 60 some odd Earth radii away. So 60 times that distance away is on the other side of the wall over here, right? And so when I realized that the thing was 60 some odd Earth radii away from me, and I saw how big it was in the sky, I could suddenly see the sky in 3D. Also in the night sky was Jupiter, and I knew it was on the opposite side of the sun and it's 10 times bigger than Earth. And seeing how big it appeared in my night sky, knowing these distances, right? Things look smaller the farther away they are. Knowing these distances, I was like, holy, whoa, how massive and large Jupiter is, right? But then one night, I had this buddy who he had not done well in school. Let's just say it that way. He wasn't an academic dude, but he had crazy curiosity. And one day, he invites me up to his father's home in the coastal mountains of California outside the town of Elk. And he's like, "Hey, brother, bring a couple of telescopes." And so I bring up 2 telescopes. And so I'm there doing my thing, kind of ignoring him. And he says to me, he goes, "Hey, bro, what's that fuzzy thing up there in the sky?" And I'm like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, man, I can see it even without the telescope." And I'm like, get out of here, right? But more profane in real time. And he's like, "Yeah, man." And he had this sincerity in his voice. I'm like, the only naked eye blob I know is the Andromeda galaxy. And where we're looking, the time of year it ain't Andromeda time. What is this dude talking about? So I'm thinking he's making some kind of error. So I go and look through his eyepiece, and sure enough, there it is. And I'm like, he said he could see it without the naked eye. So I pull away and look along the barrel of the telescope to the sky, and there it is. And then it struck me. I had always known that the Andromeda galaxy can be seen with the naked eye in a dark enough place, but I knew it had to be really dark, and I hadn't really tried it. I hadn't had the opportunity. But there it was. Now, you can only see the bulge of it, but in the night sky, right, it's bigger than the full moon by several times, right? It's 3 degrees across, right? The moon is like half a degree. That's 6 times bigger. And that thing is 2.5 million light years away. So now again, knowing that I'm looking at something that's 2.5 million light years away, it's looking that big in my night sky, my brain shattered because I could feel how big that thing was. And it was just impossibly huge. And that's the crazy thing about the cosmological realm, right? An atom is 10 to the minus 10 meters across. A nucleus, 10 to the minus 15. That sounds crazy tiny, and it is. But just our galaxy, 10 to the minus 15 going in smallness, 10 to the 21 going in bigness. And I'm just like, bro, man, where am I? What is this cruel joke reality has played on me? You want me to wrap my mind around this bigness? Whoa, man. Wow. Albert Einstein gets a lot of the credit for this idea of space-time, but it originates with Minkowski. And the idea here is that there is a relationship between space and time, but it's more fundamental than I think that we get in our everyday lives we have an understanding for. We know that, there's a relationship between space and time. I could say, I used to live on the Space Coast. Oh, Orlando is this particular distance away, or I could say it's an hour away, right? I could say it in space or time. And we do the same thing using light. Oh, the sun is 93 million miles away, or it's 8.4 or something light seconds away. So space and time, it's intuitive that there is a relationship between it. If I want to describe a line, the length of a line vector in a 2D XY space, right? I'll say, the Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared, right? We're familiar with that. When you add that time coordinate, it's not a plus anymore. It turns into a minus. So space and time kind of tug at each other, right? And the consequence of that is that we end up with this idea that you have a speed through space and a speed through time at all times. And just like you have a squared plus b squared equals c squared in the Pythagorean theorem, you have that your speed through space squared plus your speed through time squared equals the speed of light squared. And so you're never at rest in time, are you? Unless you're, because you can never move at the speed of light. So what does this say to us? This says to us that at all times, everything in the universe is moving through space-time because everything is moving through time. And relative to each other, we have speeds, right? If there's only one thing in the universe, what does speed even mean? But if there are two things, now and they're in motion, you have a speed relative to something else. What follows from that is that your speed through space and your speed through time will be different for each one. So each one, by having a different speed through space, has a different speed through time necessarily. And that completely breaks intuition for us humans. Time seems to be something that just ticks along at a regular rate, right? The Earth spins on its axis once a day, goes around the sun on its orbit once a year, right? That's the same. A year is a year, a second is a second, a minute is a minute. Actually not. And it's all because of this four-dimensional space-time where space and time tug against each other. You are moving through space-time at the speed of light. You're not moving through space at the speed of light. You may be moving through time at near the speed of light, which is the maximal speed, but at all times, you and everything else in the universe are moving through space-time at the speed of light. Not through space at the speed of light, not through time at the speed of light, but through space-time, the combination. It's kind of like Galileo discovered. An object at rest or in motion remains at rest or in motion unless acted upon by an outside force, right? Why is that? Well, at the same way, your motion through space-time is a constant. It is unchanging, but it kind of shifts between space and time. So for example, if you're out there in space all alone, you're going to be moving through time at the maximum speed. But suppose you come next to a gravitating body, like a planet or a star. Your direction through motion will change. So some physicists like to say gravity turns speed through time into speed through space, right? That's why you accelerate near a gravitational body. So, it's difficult to wrap your mind around. It's super easy and it's clear as day in the mathematics of relativity. But, when you are told this and you discover this for the first time, it is a brain breaker. But it also solves mysteries. Like you might wonder, why is the speed of light considered a speed limit in the universe? Well, think about it this way. If I'm at rest relative to you, right? Relative to each other, we are not moving through space. So together, we are moving through time at the speed of light. Now, suppose I start moving rapidly through space. That means I must now move more slowly through time. So in order to move faster through space, I have to borrow. I have to subtract from my speed through time. Well, how much speed through time did I start off with? The speed of light amount, all right? So that's the maximum amount I can borrow. If I bring my speed through space up and my speed through time down, eventually I get all of that speed through time and I'm moving at the speed of light through space. Now, of course, nothing with mass can do that. And at the same time, anything that doesn't have mass, like gravitational waves, light, they must do that. But here's the thing that's really weird. If you look at light with that analogy, right, you have this phenomenon that, the faster things go, the more time gets dilated, right? So the less it travels through time. And not only that, distances shrink. So the faster you go, the shorter distances become. So you would think that light does not experience neither space nor time. But that's not true. That is not the case, right? Why is that? The reason why is when I say that I move through time at the speed of light, if we're at rest relative to each other, together we move through time at the speed of light, I just invoke the concept known as the rest frame. Well, guess what? Light does not have a rest frame. So you can't make those definitions. It's nonsensical. You can't say light doesn't experience space or time. It doesn't have a rest frame. So, the consequences of moving through space-time at the speed of light and living in a four-dimensional space-time is definitely a brain breaker, but you gotta be careful with the analogies and how you think about it, because there are subtleties all along the way that could lead you to incorrect conclusions. How is the universe both curved and flat? So by flat, we mean no curvature. Well, it's kind of like saying the Earth is both a sphere and not a sphere, right? Or, for my pedantic nerds out there, an oblate spheroid that is somewhat egg-shaped. But here's how that works. You can think of the universe and space-time curvature on two scales. There's the large-scale universe, and then there is the local universe. So yeah, next to planets like the Earth, space-time is curved. Next to the sun, space-time is curved. Next to the galaxy, space-time is curved, right? So I like to think, for example, if you think about our galaxy, we have this giant halo that extends 10 times the Milky Way's radius around it, right? So if you think about the dip in the sheet or the funnel model, that big giant halo of dark matter contains most of the mass. So it's going to create this deep depression, right? Then you got the concentration of the galactic matter there. There's going to be another deep depression. And then right in the center, because density matters, you have our supermassive black hole that's like, zoop, right? And so it's like, it's almost like you have a drilling into space-time because it's all orbiting, right? It's all spinning and orbiting. So locally, there's a lot of curvature and a lot of character to the nature of space-time. But, just like the Earth, it has mountains, it has sinkholes, it has gullies, it has valleys. There's a lot of character to the surface of Earth. But if I step back and look at Earth, it looks like a smooth blue and white ball, right? And the universe is the same way. Even though there's all of this local character, if you step out and look back far enough, it looks really smooth. There's a large-scale, global, curvatureless space-time, and there's local, highly curved space-time and curvature of various sizes and intensities based on mass and density and energy and pressure. So this overall space-time behavior takes place in a universe that is not static. The universe is expanding. So when you start talking about the universe at the cosmological scale, you have to take into account curvature of space-time and the expansion of space-time. And that, again, completely breaks our intuition. The only manifestation of space-time curvature that we experience on Earth, we call that gravity. And, we just characterize it with a single number. But in space-time, things are very different. Space is flowing, space is waving, space is stretching. And there is no analogy here in our everyday existence that prepares us for that. And that's why it takes a long time to understand cosmology. Once you get it, it seems kind of simple. But getting your mind around this stuff that is so foreign to us, out there at the cosmological scales, and then you take into effect that there are gravitational effects of phenomena that remains hidden, it really breaks your brain. Quite often when we want to create an analogy for learners to understand how space-time expansion works, we take a sphere and we put lines of latitude and longitude on it. And we place galaxies at the intersections of those lines of latitude and longitude. And then we expand the sphere, all right? So the line segments between the intersections of longitude and latitude, they get longer. But the galaxies themselves still remain at those intersections, right? So space has expanded, but they haven't moved in that particular coordinate system. And that analogy works really well because, the universe is really big. So most of the universe is far away from us. So most of the universe is expanding really fast. So that means that most of the motion of galaxies that we observed is not due to their motion within that coordinate grid, but really it's due to the expansion of the grid itself, right? So we have an idea that we call expansion drag. It's almost like, the faster it's expanding, the more it slows down its intrinsic motion in comparison to that space-time motion. So an example I like to give is tadpoles in a river. So if I'm standing at the riverbank and I'm looking from the edge of the river to the center of the river, what you're going to find is that the water near the river's edge is interacting with the bank. And that makes it move more slowly than the water out at the center. So if I'm looking at some tadpoles right here, I see them moving around relative to the water, right? They're moving back and forth, going back and forth, right? The water, is kind of like this background in which they exist. But if I look at tadpoles toward the center of the stream, they're carried away down the stream. Of course, they're flipping their little tails and they're moving around relative to some, local coordinate system. But from my perspective, standing on the bank far away, the stream speed is what characterizes their motion. And I would see them as basically at rest relative to the parcel of water that holds them, even though they're flapping around in there. Well, space-time acts the exact same way. Galaxies are moving, right? They're in orbits around each other, they're whizzing around. But because most of them are farther away, it is that motion through space-time that characterizes, that dominates their motion. And so, it's like they're nailed down to that location in space and it's just being carried away by this elevator, right? Or this conveyor belt. So in this expansion scenario, if you go far enough in the distance, you get objects that are moving away from you faster than the speed of light and even faster, right? It breaks our intuition that nothing can move through space-time faster than the speed of light, but stretching is kind of unlimited in terms of how fast it can make things move away from you. But locally, nothing is moving faster than the speed of light. When we talk about the universe as a whole, how does it break our notion of a universal present, right? This is the age of the universe. This is what the universe is right now. Well, man, it breaks it in multiple ways, right? So the first way is we know that the rate at which time travels for every entity in the universe depends on its energy situation, right? How deep of a gravitational well is it in, right? Gravity slows time. So that means when you're in an airplane or in orbit around Earth, that your clock will move faster than someone here on the ground. And also speed matters. The faster you move relative to something else, the slower your clock goes relative to that other entity. So if you look around the universe, the gravitational landscape varies. There are these vast voids between galaxies where there's very little matter. Then you have the so-called web, this filamentary structure where dark matter and matter come together to form what we call the cosmic web. Well, in the cosmic web, time is going to travel more slowly than it does inside these voids. So how do we even have a notion of the age of the universe or now if everywhere has its own clock? Well, it turns out that there are these two things that we can use. One is the evolution of stuff in the universe. Stars are cooking up elements into other elements. So, complexity is arising, right? So you can get different minerals um, after some time that you couldn't get before that time because they had to be cooked up in a particular sequence to get to exist, right? And the same way, there is light that fills the universe that has a property of averaging out things in the universe. It's called the cosmic microwave background radiation. And so there's a property that light has, right? Light is strongly coupled to space-time. So as space-time expands, light that is traveling through that space-time, it gets its wavelength stretched out by the same amount that space expanded while the light was traveling through it. And so all of the CMB, even if along different directions, lines of sight, the rate of expansion is slightly different, the cosmic microwave background radiation kind of averages out over these nuisance parameters, and so it can serve as a convenient clock. Emergence can serve as a convenient clock. So even though the fundamental reality is there is no universal now, we do have these convenient clocks that give us a bearing, give us a fiducial reference for us to speak in this way. Given this lack of universal now, cosmologists can still talk about the universe at any given time slice because of the cosmological principle, which says the universe is homogeneous and isotropic. That means it's made of the same stuff everywhere, and there are no special locations or orientations or directions, right? The thing about that is that, that homogeneity is homogeneity in space. Everywhere is kind of the same, even though it's not, right? Being in the sun is not the same thing as being on Earth or being in intergalactic space, right? But over large enough averages, we can say it's all made of the same stuff. But every time is unique, right? There is this pattern of emergence that occurs, right? Forces freeze out in the universe. You go from a universe of nothing but plasma to a universe of nothing but gas, and then you get stars and galaxies, and and structures form. So as you look around the universe, you can say, okay, this has evolved to this degree, so I can attach this time to it. And you also have the cosmic microwave background radiation, whose light is stretching uniformly in all directions, that does give you an average clock. And here's the other thing. When we model the universe when we're doing cosmology, you make these assumptions. You assume that the universe is not lumpy with filaments and all of this. You assume it's a uniform gas. And that allows you to write down equations for conservation of energy for the universe, right? And the acceleration equation for the universe. These equations allow us to perform calculations to look at the past and look at the future. They're very useful. Some people say that astronomy is a science of history because we're always looking in the past. Well, I'd say that, if you're looking at your device in front of you, you're looking into the past. All looking is looking into the past because light has to travel to you. Now, to us, light moves really fast, but that's only because we're so small. The universe is big. Light takes 2.5 million years to get to the nearest galaxy. So light ain't fast as far as the universe is concerned. You have to take that into account when you think about the universe. Is really mind-boggling to know that I can look at the universe as it exists today. I can go a certain distance away from us, and I can look at the universe as it was 100 million years ago, or 300 million years ago, or 1 billion years ago, or 5 billion years ago, or 10 billion years ago. I can do that because of the time it takes the light to travel to us for us to do those observations. Now, what I can't do is look at myself 1 million years ago, right? I can't look at the sun 1 million years ago because that light, I'd have to move faster than the speed of light, travel beyond the light that the sun emitted 1 million years ago, and then turn around and look at it and say, that's what the sun looked like 1 million years ago, right? If you had wormholes in science fiction, you could do that sort of thing, but we can't. So, it's one of those limitations of life. I used to play a lot of basketball, and I used to get a lot of basketball injuries. And I used to say to myself, man, imagine if we didn't get injuries, how fun this sport would be. So I just love colliding with people, right? I just love to be physical. Like if I could just run at full speed, just blow, life would be fun. But we have these limitations and we have to live with them. And the speed of light as a speed limit is a limitation we have to live with. And so if you want to understand the universe and how you observe it, and the fact that time and distance are related in that way, is just something you got to live with. One consequence of living in an expanding universe is that there are multiple horizons that define how far away we can see. So the universe is expanding, and the rate at which the universe is expanding varies for every observer with distance. So the farther you go away, everybody in the universe will see the same thing, right? Everybody is at rest relative to themselves. I am at rest relative to myself at all times. No matter how fast I'm moving relative to you, I'm at rest relative to myself. If light is traveling to me from the great distant beyond, right, it's going to arrive at my location based on a relationship between the distance it's traveled and the speed at which it's moving, the speed of light, right? If you're moving at 50 miles per hour, after 1 hour, you will have gone 50 miles, okay? So what does that mean? That means that as time moves forward, light from more and more distant reaches are going to reach me. So if I'm an observer and I'm looking at the limit of my observations, it's going to be a sphere around me that's going to grow with time, right? Just because light from more distant reaches are going to come to me, arrive at my location as time goes on. But now we take into the account the fact that the universe is expanding. And that means that, if I double the distance, things are moving twice as fast, 3 times the distance, 3 times as fast, 100 times the distance, 100 times as fast. Eventually, you're going to get to a point where the expansion rate reaches the speed of light, right? And we define that as the Hubble sphere. So if something is moving away from you at the speed of light and it emits light in your direction, will you be able to see that light? And the answer is, yeah, you will be able to see that light eventually. But there is a point just beyond that where you won't, right? That Hubble sphere also expands with time, but then you get to the cosmic event horizon, where this is the boundary by which objects that emit their light today, anything beyond that distance, their light will never reach us because it will travel through a region of space-time that is moving so rapidly away from us that even as it's trying to come to us, right, that expansion is pulling it back. So if you imagine that you're on a treadmill and the treadmill is moving you away, right? You can imagine a slow treadmill, a faster one, a faster one, a faster one, right? So as a human runner, if you move forward faster than the treadmill pulls you back, you make forward progress. But if you ramp up the speed of that treadmill, eventually you won't be able to make forward progress. And eventually you're going to start getting carried away. And that's how the cosmic event horizon works. Eventually you get to a point where space-time is expanding away from you so fast that whatever light you emit today, it's never going to make it to you. But notice I say light emitted today. If you look at the most distant objects whose light is reaching us today, they were much closer to us in the distant past. And that's when their light started traveling to us. But then the expansion of space-time took them beyond our cosmic event horizon. So those objects, even though their light is coming to us and will eventually reach us, the objects themselves are beyond the cosmic event horizon. And so that defines a third horizon called the particle horizon. It's not for objects whose emitting light today, it's for objects whose light is arriving at us today. And so those objects, if you look at the cosmic event horizon, it's around 16 billion light years away. The Hubble sphere is around 14 billion light years away. The particle horizon is more like 46 billion light years away. So we can see the light from objects that are now 46 billion light years away from us. That expanding universe changes everything. In the far future, which is, far is relative, as far as the age of the universe, as we can extrapolate it, the universe is going to be around for a very, very long time. So as far as I'm concerned, we're still in our universe's infancy. If I look at how long the universe is thought to exist, is going to exist, with stars in it, for example, and I say, okay, let's make the analogy that universe existing into the future known quantity is equivalent to a human being that's 100 years old. How old is the universe now in comparison to that? It's like a couple of days, 2-3 days old right now, right? So the universe is still at its infancy. And one thing that I like to say is, you know how the universe is still at its infancy? Because you can observe it. Only a new universe is observable, because that expansion is going to take all the galaxies, except for the ones that are gravitationally bound to us, like Andromeda, outside of our cosmic event horizon. And eventually we won't be able to see any of them in the distant future. And the Andromeda galaxy and the Milky Way galaxy are going to combine, right? They're going to collide and combine to form the Hakeem galaxy, or, Milkomeda. And at that point, our entire observable universe is going to consist of this galaxy and these cosmic backgrounds. Everything else will be swept out of our line of sight. We can still make measurements. We can use like pulsars to measure gravitational waves that are passing through this universe and do some cosmology. We can still measure the cosmic microwave background radiation, its polarizations, its fluctuations and variations, and do some cosmology. But as far as looking at galaxies, that game's over.
Want to support the channel? Join the Big Think members community, where you get access to videos early, ad-free.